Hello everybody, my name is Boulevard. Welcome to Tournament Tactician, the premier something like a tournament tier list for Legends of Runeterra. Do this every time there's a Runeterra open, and there is one this upcoming weekend for the Fates Voyage Beyond season. Now, as a reminder to everyone, this is a just for fun tournament. There's no cash prizing, there's no Worlds points on the line, they're not going to retroactively give out Worlds points for this one. It is just for fun. You'll still get like the titles and the boards, and you can still be a Runeterra champion and things like that. But for the most part, this is just a more casual Runeterra open, but it's still good practice for me to stretch my analytical legs at the start of 2024, so let's dive into it. So let's say that you want to use this event as your reintroduction into competitive Legends of Runeterra in 2024. Boulevard, talk to me like I have absolutely no idea what's happening. I'm not going to do that. My videos always assume that you have some baseline knowledge of Legends of Runeterra. So Elder Morgana Galio is absolutely dominating the meta right now. You can go to any stats website and take a look for yourself what this deck does. The problem with this list for tournaments, and the reason it's not dominating grassroots in the fashion that it is ladder, is Elder Dragon is one of the best champions in the game, and Morgana is also one of the best champions in the game. So putting them both together in one deck really puts a target on this deck for the ban strategy. On top of that, Mordekaiser is one of the best champions in the game, and Mordekaiser really wants to get paired with either Elder Dragon or Morgana for maximum efficiency. So you are not only building a deck that is very likely to get banned, you're front-loading a lot of power in your lineup into it, but you're also handicapping your Mordekaiser. Yes, you can still play Mordekaiser without these champions, but it is significantly weaker than if you had just done it with those champions in the first place. So let's say that you are hard set on the fact that this is going to be absolutely everywhere. I want to just punish everybody that is playing Elder Morgana Galio. How do I do that? There are only two decks that are performing very well into this, and that is Mordekaiser and War Mothers. It doesn't matter what kind of Mordekaiser, it does matter what kind of War Mothers. The only one that is doing it is Shadow Isle War Mothers. Elder Dragon War Mothers will not do it because this list is full of 0 attack units and 3 attack units, so things like Eradication, Quietus, and Soul Harvest are really important tools to deal with the Elder Morgana Galio. Once you branch outside of that, then things can get a little sketchy for a couple of different reasons. For example, here, this is a Mordekaiser deck. Like we said, you know, it loses to Mordekaiser. This is also a Mordekaiser deck. We go down to this other red. That is Volibear. That is Shadow Isle War Mothers. What's this? It's Lurk. Ignore that. Lurk. This is Shadow Isle War Mothers. This is Shadow Isle War Mothers. Then we get to page 3. This is where we kind of get to the dredges. And then there's a couple of lists that people are looking at as dedicated counters that are a little more unproven. As you can see, the sample sizes here aren't great. We have Elder Dragon LeBlanc, which, if you look at the most popular lists of these, are still running one Mordekaiser, so you would have to take that out. And Elder Dragon LeBlanc is sort of a balls-to-the-wall 5-attack unit deck that is looking to just slam unit after unit into the face of this list until you're constantly trading on units. You're really not playing any spells that get hit by the Mage Seeker Jr. It's just like Might and Bloody Business and Whirling Death. So the fact that you are up to 3 mana on all of those spells doesn't matter outside of reduced cost Bloody Business, but whatever, it's still down from the 4 mana you were initially paying. This one's been popping up on ladder, or at least I've been running into it on ladder quite a bit. I haven't been playing the Elder Dragon Morgana list, so like, I haven't been having too much of a problem with this. And those players or even have the one of Mordekaiser that you likely would not have in your tournament lineup because you want to use one of the more traditional Mordekaisers to counter the Morgana Elder Dragon. And then Aatrox Reaver's Row. This is sort of just a low to the ground, fast one-drop deck with a bunch of weapons in it. Like, as you can see, we're getting into some cheesy shit here when it comes to finding a third deck that is going to reliably counter the Morgana Elder Dragon. If you want something a little more traditional that isn't going to break the bank, PNZ Elusives and Annie Jin are still losing to Elder Morgana Galio, but not by a whole lot. These are the stats of Elder Morgana Galio into the deck. So PNZ Elusives has a 48% win rate into Elder Morgana Galio. Annie Jin has a 47% win rate. Those numbers aren't awful, right? You'd like to see, things that are closer to a 40% matchup for the Elder Dragon Morgana Galio, but these are some of the things that are closest to 50% if you're looking to have a more reasonable, well-rounded lineup than just jamming some kind of like, I only beat Elder Dragon Morgana Galio and my matchup charts from there go wildly off the rails. So if you are looking to beat Morgana Elder Galio, my recommendation would be any Mordekaiser list you are comfortable with, War Mother's Call Shadow Isle specifically, and then Piltover and Zaun Elusives, because I'm just not a big Annie Jin person. I like the PNZ Elusives a little bit more, but again, these are two aggressive options that you can round out your lineup with. Now, before we get into what the meta looks like if your opponents aren't all running this, let's talk about 6x and 9x Mage Seeker Jr. lineups and why I don't think you should be worried about them. First of all, over on this other tab, I've got a list of lineups that have been winning grassroots tournaments over the last 3 days. So, like, we're pretty deep into the meta. We have a pretty good understanding of what things are going to look like. And Elder Morgana Galio is not performing in winning lineups, really. I think there was one Elder Morgana Galio out of like 8 tournaments or something like that, because again, the lineup cost associated with it is very high. So I really don't think you're going to get many, if any, 6x or 9x Mage Seeker Junior decks. I know people have been kind of like trolling around with it and talking about like, oh, you know, what if? But for the most part, I think that these champions in combination with each other make something special. If you try to separate them out into like, oh, well, I'll run Elder Morgana and then traditional Galio Formidables, then like you either have a super scuffed third deck, and I don't think you really want to go like Morgana in one deck, Galio in one deck, Elder Dragon in another. It just doesn't seem like a recipe for success. 6x almost feels viable if you just want to like cut the Galio out of this and then go like Formidables. But for the most part, I'm just going to come out and say that I do not think you should be concerning yourself with 6x and 9x Mage Seeker Jr. It's possible that it'll exist and you'll run into it and it'll top cut, but it's not something I would take into account when building out my lineup if my plan is to ban Elder Morgana Galio every time that I see it. So, if we're looking at a more level-headed field, what are we expecting to run into? And the answer is Mordekaiser. I think a lot more people are auto-including Mordekaiser in their lineup, or looking to build a strong Mordekaiser foundation for their lineup than they are looking at the Elder Morgana Galio. Mordekaiser's a lot more generic. It's got a lesser cost associated with the lineup building while still being very powerful. And there are 2 major versions. We have Inquisitor Mordekaiser and we have Viego Elder Mordekaiser with some slight variations. You know, maybe you're not running the Elder Dragon in the Viego Mordekaiser. Maybe you're running Demacia. Maybe you're running Ionia. I have tried just playing Inquisitor Mordekaiser with Viego. Gotta say, very noticeable lack of Morgana. Not the same deck by any stretch of the imagination. Do not try jamming Viego into your Inquisitor Mordekaiser. I tried. It went horribly. Maybe it'll work better for you. Did not work for me, therefore I cannot recommend it. But when we look at the differences between these two, Inquisitor Mordekaiser has a more well-rounded matchup chart. It's a little bit less swingy and volatile. It has its solid matchups. It's losing to a couple of things, but for the most part, it still has that very incredibly solid plan B that is different from, like, the Viego Elder plan B is just like make a big Viego, which is not too different from just like let Mordekaiser take over the board. Inquisitor will really tax your opponent's mana and start to attack them on a different front, whereas like, while the Viego stuff is very explosive, it is attacking them on the same front as the Mordekaiser is. Like, for example, Inquisitor Mordekaiser is going to make it a lot more difficult for your opponent to wipe your board and deal with all your shit. Viego is just another thing for your opponent to deal with. So they are coming from different directions. But just talking about the decks that are doing well. First of all, it's important to recognize that Viego Elder is the one that is winning the Mordekaiser mirror match. So if you are going into this tournament looking to pick on Mordekaiser, then you do have your work cut out for you in which Mordekaiser deck you want to include in your lineup. Some other things that are doing well into Inquisitor Mordekaiser are Piltover and Zancet, which includes Seraphine and Karmaset, Elder Dragon Nora, Elusives, both kinds, War Mother's Call, Elder Ari, and Annie Jin. Now, Elder Ari is something that I've been playing on ladder and enjoying, but looking at the stats on it, it is pretty much just a, hey, go ahead and stomp out the Mordekaiser player kind of deck. Everything else is a little bit more sus. It's pretty poor into aggro. It's really poor into Elder Morgana Galio. And aggro is something that is going to be a little bit more real than it usually is for events like this. And so, yeah, if you want to go super hard on the counter Mordekaiser strategy, not something I'd super recommend, then Elder Ari is something that you can look at for your lineup. Or if you just want to have fun, then yeah, I think Elder Ari's been loads of fun for me. So the problem with Viego Elder Mordekaiser is that you're actually not beating any of the things that Inquisitor Mordekaiser is losing to. Like, the matchup charts are pretty similar for the two variations, but again, Viego Elder is just beating Inquisitor, and that's sort of the more important thing to be looking at. If you're running an anti-Inquisitor lineup, you're still going to do very well, if not better, into Viego Elder. And so that's, if you're going to look to soft target something, I definitely think Mordekaiser is what you want to be looking to soft target. The problems with a lineup like this is that we only have stats for Ionia Seraphine. So if you wanted to go like, if you wanted to run like Karmaset, and then like Targon Seraphine, that's just not something we have stats on. If that's something you've been testing, in theory, it sounds pretty good. The Ionia stuff, however, does play a very significant role in beating Mordekaiser, because you just like, oh, they played Mordekaiser, I'll just bounce the Mordekaiser. Oh, they played something with Deathless, I'll just like return it to their hand to remove the Deathless. And Targon's not really giving you something like that outside of like Hush and then kill the Inquisitor to remove Deathless, but like a Deathless Mordekaiser is going to be a much larger issue for Targon Seraphine than it is for Ionia Seraphine. And so I do not think on paper you would have success trying to double up on Karmaset and then a Targon Seraphine list. So probably just stick, if you want to be safe, just stick with one of the P and Z Ionia lists. And then we talk about Elder Nora, which is like not a hard counter. It's slightly winning into Inquisitor Mordekaiser and then barely winning into Viego Elder. So Elder Nora, one of the weaker decks for your lineup in terms of like just hard countering Mordekaiser, but still one of the more solid decks overall, something that makes for a little bit more of a well-rounded lineup, and something that I would definitely recommend as better into aggro thanks to the pie tosses and the group shots and the drop the bombs and all that kind of stuff. If you want to see a Elder Bandle City deck that's a little bit better into aggro than Elder Nora, boy, do I have a deck for you that's up on my YouTube channel called Elder Darkness, but that's not something I would recommend. It's just, you know, that's me having a little fun here. Then we have elusives. Both forms of elusives, Freljord elusives, Fizz Yumi, and Piltover and Zon elusives, Teemo Yumi, are doing well into both of these lists. War Mothers are still doing well into both of these lists, which is why I don't necessarily hate the idea of going like, you know, Viego, Elder Mordekaiser, Shadow Isle, War Mother's Call, and then Piltover and Zon elusives. Not only are you like okay into Elder Morgana Galio, if that's a strategy that you want to try to pick on, but you're also doing very well into Inquisitor Mordekaiser. And so, yeah, it's looking like a pretty okay counter lineup that's good into 2 of the best decks in the game. And so, one of the more hard counter focused lineups that I'd be a little more comfortable recommending, but again, like, sus to call it a hard counter lineup when it is still technically losing into Elder Morgana Galio. It's just like as close to 50% as you're going to get. Elder Ari, like I mentioned, this is like a Spike the Mordekaiser or fuck off kind of thing. And then Annie Jin, the two sort of standout aggro decks of the format, Annie Jin and Elusive, still doing well into both Elder Morgana, or doing okay into Elder Morgana Galio, and then doing well into Mordekaiser. So I think that you've kind of got all your bases covered if you want to run 3 of these 4 decks. Ideally these 2 and then 1 of these, so you're not like really soft into Elder Morgana Galio. Because again, this is still a good deck. It does good deck things, and that means sometimes it's going to beat the counter matchups. And if the counter is a 48% win rate for the counter, you're going to get fucked. At least once. So, if you're not running... If you're really worried about getting counter picked, right? If you don't want to run the Morgana Elder, and you don't want to run Mordekaiser, because I just kind of outlined that there is lineups that exist that kind of overlap on beating these 2, then what is your lineup looking like? And the answer is actually quite apparent through the grassroots scene recently, as a lot of players have come through not running either of these decks and finding success in a lot of these events. So I do want to highlight that both of these Wolfoxy events are actually the same player. They won with Bandle City Nico, Elder Elites, and Overwhelm. This is Darius Nar. So again, none of the top end of the meta that is looking to get picked on. Down here we have a Mordekaiser, so you know, that one doesn't really count, but rounding it out with like Seraphine Set and Freljord elusives. Down here we have the same play that one up here. Reaver's Row Aatrox, Freljord Neela Jack, and Karma Set. Sometimes if you're not running the top 2 decks, yeah, your lineups start to look really weird. I don't think a lot of people were talking about like Bandle City Nico and Elder Elites and Overwhelm as part of their lineup, or Freljord Neela Jack. And if you're wondering what this is, anytime I default to region champion and you don't know what it is because I didn't know what it is either. The Freljord portion of this deck is Omenhawk and Yadulski, and then everything else is Bilgewater. It like runs 3 copies of Angel, so like again, not something that's on radars. Round that out with Reaver's Row Aatrox and Karma Set. So pretty, which is weird because like Reaver's Row Aatrox is supposed to counter Galio Elder Morgana. That's why you put that in the lineup. Karma Set does not do that. So a little bit of a weird one here. That said, if you do want to run an Ionia PNZ deck and you are looking to counter, or not counter, but like leave up Galio Morgana Elder, if you just want to pretend that deck doesn't exist, and if you run into, you'll leave it open, you're looking to beat the 3rd deck, Karma Set should have a better chance into Galio Morgana Elder than Seraphine, just because, well, Seraphine gets hit harder by Mage Seeker Jr. than Karma Set does. However, Seraphine can also turn on a little bit earlier than Karma Set. Like, it's actually pretty hard to last until turn 10 if Galio is coming down on 7. That's at minimum 2 attack tokens out of your opponent, maybe just 1 out of your opponent if, like, you're getting down the Karma on 9 and then they have token on 10. But for the most part, like, Karma Set going to be a little more resilient to the Mage Seeker Jr., but getting over that hump of turns 8, 9, 10, or 7, 8, 9 rather, could be a little bit more difficult. But either way, like, if you're going to leave open Morgana Elder, probably shouldn't be bringing Ionia PNC. Then we have Vayne Morgana Aatrox, Elder Nora, and Karma Set. So again, no Mordekaiser, no Morgana Elder. Same thing down here. Nope, these all include Mordekaiser. So this is kind of what I was talking about. At the Panda Cup, we had PNZ, Elusives, Elder Mordekaiser, and War Mothers. This is a lineup that I actually really like, and probably what I would be running in the Open this weekend, if for no other reason than to give it a shot, you know? I talk a lot about how you shouldn't be running soft counters and hard counters in the Swiss portion, but with no prizing on the line, if you've ever disagreed with that, now is the time to experiment with that. I would treat this more like a big grassroots event than I would an actual Runeterra Open, because again, we are not playing for cash, we are not playing for Worlds points, we're just playing for the Runeterra Open Top Cut cosmetics. And so, yeah, now's a great time to try and experiment. I might end up playing in it, I don't know yet. I was planning to, but I actually have a wake on Saturday, and I don't know if that's really going to put me in the Runeterra mood. So, anyway, that is most of it. Again, don't expect to see a crazy amount of Elder Morgana Galio. Expect to see a crazy amount of Mordekaiser, and plan appropriately. The one thing that you do need to make sure of is, again, looking at this list, you can see that a lot of the lineups do not include Elder Morgana Galio or Mordekaiser. And so you need to be asking yourself, is my lineup really soft into random shit? Usually when we talk about, like, just play good decks, the hallmark of a good deck is that it's pretty good into random shit. And if your opponent is like, even if they build a deck specifically to spike this, then they are losing to other shit, right? So, like, it's possible, because these are smaller tournaments, that, like, the Reaver's Row Aatrox Neela Jack player only played against people that their lineup was designed to beat. This couldn't have been more than, like, a 20 or 30 person tournament. And so, in a field of 1,000, you're just going to run into what you run into. Does that make sense? So, again, have a plan, either ban this or beat it. I really like this. And this is what the Mordekaiser matchups look like. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope that was helpful for the first Runeterra Open Tournament Tactician of the year. This meta seems pretty straightforward. I'm not expecting any crazy surprises, but, like, with the stakes so low, you never actually know what's going to happen. Usually in high-stakes events, people play it really safe. That's why we saw such a homogenized deck selection at the World Championship. Here, we're in the Wild West. I can try and prepare you the best I can, and that is the most solid information that I can give you. But again, people are going to be doing whatever they want because there are no stakes. And so I'm not going to sit here and beat you to death with more stats and going through the charts one by one when that is effectively my analysis. So thank you so much for watching. I've been Boulevard. Good luck in your tournaments this weekend. I will see you next time.